Hi. Last night I played in the first round of the George O'Rourke Memorial at the Wachusett Chess Club in Fitchburg, Mass. I had the white pieces and I was on board 1, paired against Jim Hankard, who had a rating of 1652. I played d4, he played g6, I played e4, and he played bishop to g7. I played knight to c3, and he played c5, challenging my center. And I considered a few moves here, but I decided to try to keep my center pawn by playing d5, which also gets me more space, and gives black the option of taking on c3, which Jim went for. He played bishop takes c3, b takes c3. And while white's pawn structure is damaged, what white gets in exchange is the 2 bishops and some dark squared weaknesses on black's king side because of the absence of his previously fianchettoed bishop. Jim played queen a5, I played bishop to d2, and he played d6. Not a big fan of queen a5 because bishop d2 to defend the c3 pawn is natural and develops a piece, and the queen's going to have to get out of there later. So maybe d6 immediately was good for black with the idea to play knight f6 and get castled kingside and get the rest of the pieces developed. He played d6 though after all, which is a nice move. I played c4, attacking the queen and maybe preparing to put the dark squared bishop on the weakened long diagonal. Queen a4 from Jim, hitting c4, and I played bishop to d3. I wanted to play knight to e2, but I thought that might drop the pawn on c4, so I thought let's put the bishop on d3 first, protecting these center pawns, and then bring the knight out to e2 and c3. Here, black maybe had the option to play b5, but I think this is pretty good for white. After c takes b5, black's idea would have been c4, I guess. But then bishop e2 or bishop f1, and when black retakes on b5, I can't imagine he's going to hold on to this pawn on c4 for longer than a few more moves. Jim played e5 though, which I think is a very good move. White has the 2 bishops, and for that reason would like an open center. On top of that, the bishop on d3 right now is a very bad piece. So white would like to, at some point, play e5 and make it a little bit better. Black plays e5, though, locking the center, which helps out knights against bishops, and which keeps the bishop on d3 a bad piece. I played knight e2. The knight's headed for the queen side. It's going to go to b5 and then be threatening to jump into c7 or to capture the d6 pawn. Knight d7 from Jim, knight c3. Jim played queen a5, which I think is fine. I was expecting queen a6, and then after knight to b5, knight c7 is threatened, and I don't think black wants to play king d8, so he'd have to play queen b6. And I was thinking about playing a4, intending a5. So for example, if black plays a6, there's a5, when the only available square is d8, which allows knight takes d6 check. And if black plays a5, of course, the b5 square becomes a really nice outpost for that white knight. As I mentioned, Jim played queen a5, and I played knight b5. And here, again, queen b6 is kind of forced. But Jim, I think, missed that my bishop on d2 was attacking his queen on a5, so he played king e7 to defend the d6 pawn, and I took the queen. This kind of thing happens sometimes, and I think what he did, which is continue to play the game and try to find some counterplay, is the right way to handle it. b6 from black. I mean, in this kind of situation, up a queen, white can just kind of sacrifice a bunch of pieces and go after the black king, but I thought, why not be safe and bring the pieces back, and then open some part of the board and reactivate the pieces wherever that is. a6, knight c3, h6, a4, looking to open the queen side with a5, rook b8, castle kingside, g5, bishop to e2, looking to turn what was a giant pawn into something that can be traded for one of black's minor pieces. Knight g to f6, bishop g4 anyway, because after knight takes g4, queen takes g4, there is no good revealed attack on the white queen. Instead, Jim played knight f8. I traded on c8, and then played a5, opening the queen side. b takes a5, rook takes a5, knight g6, rook takes a6, knight to f4, And again, here, in the interest of being safe, even though this knight is attacking by itself and doesn't threaten anything, I removed it from the board with bishop takes f4. And after g takes f4, played queen to b1. This is a strange-looking move because it invites rook b8, but my idea was, in response, I'd play rook a7 check, when the black king can't retreat, or the rook on b8 will be lost. So knight to d7 is forced, and then I thought I'd play queen a2, and either bring the queen up to a4 to put more pressure on the knight, or bring it up to a6 and the knight to b5, and then those two pieces would be coordinated against the pawn on d6. But Jim didn't play rook b8, he played king f8. I played rook takes d6, king g7, and again here white can just take on f6 and then invade with the queen and the other rook and the knight and advance this passed pawn and will win, but I thought, why not keep the material on the board? I played queen b6, Jim played knight h5, rook a1, rook b8, queen takes c5, knight f6, rook a6, and this is the last, I guess, interesting moment of the game. I, in playing rook a6, didn't even analyze what Jim played, which is knight takes e4, which is actually kind of dangerous, because if I play knight takes e4, this rook b1 checkmate, and the queen is under attack, and black threatens to take on c3, followed by rook b1 checkmate. So I can't save all my material by going queen a3, knight takes c3, queen takes c3, or I will get mated. But the mating idea I had been looking at before I played rook a6 still works here. So if you'd like to, pause the video and see if you can find it. All right, I played rook g6 check. Jim took on g6 with his f-pawn, but had he played the only other option, king h7, I would have played queen e7, threatening queen takes f7 checkmate. And black has one less move than he needs to go knight takes c3 and rook b1. And had he tried to defend the pawn on f7 with rook h to f8, I would have played rook takes h6 check, king g8, rook a to g6 check, f takes g6, and queen h7 checkmate. As I said, Jim played f takes g6 instead of moving the king, so I played queen e7 check, king g8, and rook takes g6 checkmate. That's round one. There are 4 rounds of the tournament left, and I will be back next week with the second round. I'll probably produce some other videos in the meantime, maybe some rapid games if nothing else. All right, thanks for watching.